Live from Washington, this is BBC News. 6 months since the attacks by Hamas on Israel, hostages' families tell Benjamin Netanyahu to bring them home now. Events are held across Rwanda to mark 3 decades since the beginning of the genocide against ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus. We'll speak to one survivor. And as March Madness wraps up, South Carolina takes down Caitlin Clark's Iowa team to win the Women's College Basketball National Championship. Hello, I'm Carl Nassman. Israel's military says it's withdrawing most of its troops from southern Gaza. The defense minister Yoav Gallant claims Israel's weeks-long attack on the city of Khan Yunis means Hamas is no longer functioning as a military organization there. The Israeli military says troops will now prepare for another assault, including on the city of Rafah, where an estimated 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering. It's now 6 months since Hamas attacked Israel, killing some 1,200 people, taking more than 250 hostages and triggering the war. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists that the group will be eliminated, but as Jeremy Bowen reports, an Israeli victory looks far from certain.
Over 6 months, Gaza has been ravaged by war, disease, death, and now imminent famine caused by Israel's siege. The UN calls it a betrayal of humanity. Kibbutz Nir Oz, right on Israel's border with Gaza, feels like a time capsule, stuck in the horrors of the 7th of October. Hamas broke in at dawn. They killed or took hostage a quarter of the 400 or so Israelis who lived here.
Said was laying there, dead, murdered. You could see that he was trying to hold the door closed. And actually, the door was locked. The army was opened the door later.
Ron Bahat and his family survived in their safe room. Then he recovered dead friends and neighbors, some in pieces.
In this house, that was the first time that we realized that we are not looking for only bodies, because the beginning, we took a lot of bodies.
The interrupted, terminated lives. Laundry neatly folded the night before the attack give Israelis a sense of moral clarity. Going around this place, you can understand why Israelis believe very strongly that they're fighting a just war in Gaza. Of course, their allies feel the same. Their quarrel is with the methods that Israel has been using that have cost so many innocent Palestinian lives. And as for the family who lived here, in this house, they're dead. Israelis support the war. Many are also back on the streets, demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister. Netanyahu's stated war aims, total victory over Hamas, as well as freeing the hostages, have not been achieved. The demonstrators say that's because they come second to his own political survival. Nava Rosario leads a movement called Shame.
Netanyahu has an interest to lengthen the war as much as he can, because as long as the war is still going on, he can say that now is not the time to new elections. Now is not the time to look for who is responsible, which is he.
Everyone here faces uncertainty, sometimes fear, and a forbidding future. Israelis and Palestinians look at each other with horror since the 7th of October. The old city of Jerusalem, the heart of their conflict, has been mostly quiet. During Ramadan, many Palestinians under 55 need police permission to join the crowds moving to the Holy Mosque. Palestinians were already convinced that their lack of rights under Israeli occupation amounted to apartheid. Israel denies that allegation. And another, considered plausible by the World Court, that it is committing genocide in Gaza. Both sides believe that the other has carried out inhuman, unforgivable crimes since the 7th of October. New wounds on a century of scars. Dimitri Diliani, a Palestinian Christian activist, says Israelis are in denial.
Killing children is killing children. It doesn't matter who is the child that's being killed. It doesn't matter who is doing the killing. I do sympathize with the Holocaust. I recognize the Holocaust, but that does not mean a green light for Israel to commit a genocide against my people or any other people, matter of fact.
This is Ramallah on the West Bank. Polls show Palestinians have strong support for the Hamas attacks. But like most Israelis, they deny that their side commits atrocities.
What happened on October 7th was just one thing that happened in many years of oppression. So again, I'm going to repeat myself, that our struggle will continue until we are free. That's what any people under occupation, under oppression, under colonial settlerism will do.
We can report firsthand here on the occupied West Bank, just as we can from Israel. But foreign journalists are not allowed into Gaza by Israel or Egypt. The BBC commissioned a Palestinian freelance in Rafah to film 11-year-old Rima getting food for her family.
If we get there early, we get some food. But if we're too late, the food runs out, so we won't have anything to eat. The food we bring is only enough for one meal.
This has become a daily ritual for the children like Rima who fled to this part of Rafah with their families. Much less aid reaches northern Gaza, where famine is imminent. Israel, under US pressure, is letting more food in, but it's also insisting that it can't finish off Hamas without attacking this town, where 1.4 million Palestinians, including Rima, are sheltering. She says getting her family food makes her happy, but Rima's pot is all 7 people have to eat in a single day. 6 months on, the Gaza war is not over. A wider Middle East war threatens. This could get worse.
Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen there. The anniversary of the Hamas attacks of October 7th also marks 6 months of captivity for the 133 people still believed to be held hostage in Gaza. Their family members want Benjamin Netanyahu to make a deal to free them. Those calls are coming not only from Israel, but from the Jewish diaspora. 6 months in, frustration is mounting. On Sunday here in Washington, protesters gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. Their message was, bring them home. Well, joining me now is Jonathan Dekel-Chen. His son, Sagi, is one of those still being held hostage by Hamas. And Jonathan was also at today's rally there in Washington. It's been 6 months now since your son was taken hostage by Hamas. How are you and your family, including Sagi's wife and his 3 daughters, coping?
Well, it's a living nightmare, quite honestly, for us, both our immediate family as well as our kibbutz family. We're from kibbutz Nir Oz. On that morning, exactly 6 months ago, hundreds of Palestinian terrorists and looters descended on our kibbutz, leaving behind 40 murdered civilians. 80 hostages were taken from our community. Our homes destroyed, looted, and our way of life all but eradicated. So every morning that we get up, we have to sort of put our lives together again. And all of this, of course, is the background for our fear about the fate of our loved ones, including my son.
Have you heard anything about your son's faith? Do you know his fate? Do you know if he is still alive or what kind of condition he might be in?
The only thing we know is that in the end of November, early December, about 100 hostages of the total 240 were released. Of those 100 released hostages, about 40 were from our kibbutz community. And a number of them, women and teenagers, had seen Sagi and other people from our community in the tunnels under Gaza. We know that in the end of November, therefore, that he was alive, he was wounded, but we have heard absolutely nothing since then, and that has been the same for all of the other hostages. So the last sign of life we had was in the end of November, and we already knew that the conditions in the tunnels were horrific for those people who remained there.
You were at a rally in Washington calling for the release of the hostages. You've been meeting with some lawmakers. What is your message for Americans and for the U.S. government?
Well, my message here to your audience and my message today at the rally on the footsteps of the Lincoln Memorial is that, and it's not just for U.S. lawmakers, it's for all parties involved. So the intermediaries, if that's the United States, Egypt, Qatar. I mean, there's not much to be said for Hamas, but for my government as well in Israel, that the first step for any kind of future for Israelis and Palestinians to stop this cycle of violence and cruelty is to get our hostages back. That is the first step. Without that, this war doesn't end. And without that, I fear that this multi-generational, what is already a multi-generational conflict that only grows hatred, there are no victories here. And we can only begin to heal on both sides of the border with Gaza if the hostages are released from Hamas captivity. Without that, there really is no future. So I would implore not just the U.S. government, but more so the intermediaries from the Middle East to do all that they must to get Hamas to release these hostages.
Last question for you. There have been large protests in Israel as well, many of them critical of the Israeli government. How much confidence do you have in Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring your son home?
It's not a question of my confidence or anyone else's. It is his moral national responsibility to get them home, or as many of them who are still alive, to get them home, and the bodies of those that we know already are dead. The southern part of Israel was abandoned by our government on October 7th. Our sons, our daughters, fathers, mothers, children were sacrificed on that day. It is utterly incomprehensible and unacceptable that our government, whomever is seated in the government, would allow those who are still left behind, those 133, 134, to die in Hamas captivity. We were notified yesterday of one of our people from Kibbutz Nir Oz, Elad Katzir, who was found dead and by Israeli troops. And we know for sure that he was alive. He was forced to record hostage videos by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. We know he was alive. He died in captivity. Therefore, our demand of our government, without giving out grades, our demand is that it do all that it must to get the hostages home. It will be painful. Negotiating with a terrorist organization is a painful thing, but there doesn't seem to be any alternative to get them home alive. I think we can all agree that Hamas must be eradicated, but that must not come with the sacrifice of those people who have already been sacrificed once by our government.
Jonathan Deckelhen, whose son Sagi is one of those still being held hostage by Hamas now 6 months on. We thank you very much for joining us. Meanwhile, the UK's Foreign Secretary is warning that the UK's support for Israel is not unconditional. Writing in the Sunday Times, Lord Cameron said that there was no doubt where the blame lies, warning it must never happen again after 3 British men were among 7 charity workers killed when their convoy was hit in Gaza last week. However, the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, defended the UK's continued arms sales to Israel. He's rejected calls for the government to publish the legal advice he's had about whether Israel's conduct in the war has breached international law.
Have specific concerns about different areas of Israel's conduct. We are raising those concerns with Israel. By the way, it's so important to remember this. We've gone from the horrors of 6 months ago to holding Israel to extraordinary high standards. It's right that we do so, and it's right that we raise these concerns where we say, look, what you're doing in respect of not getting aid in, or what you're doing in respect of your targeting, raises concerns for us, and we need you to engage.
Representatives of Hamas, Israel, Qatar, and the United States met for ceasefire talks in Cairo on Sunday. Bill Burns, the director of the U.S.'s CIA, attended. He's seen here meeting with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. One Egyptian news agency is reporting that the Qatari and Hamas delegations are on their way home and could return to Egypt within days to attempt to finalize a deal. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let's take a look now at another story making news. Police in Bradford have released the name of a man who's wanted in connection with the murder of a woman on Saturday afternoon. Habiba Massoum is 25 and from the Oldham area. He's wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of a 27-year-old woman who was pushing her baby in a pram in Bradford city centre. A knife has been recovered from the scene of the incident. Judith Moritz has more.
Detectives are casting their net wider than just here in Bradford. Habiba Massoum is said to have links to places including Oldham, Burnley and Chester. And so West Yorkshire Police say that they're liaising with neighbouring forces as well as those further afield who may be able to help.
Witnesses say after stabbing the woman multiple times, the man ran off before anyone could stop him. Detectives say they've had a good response from witnesses and are following up a number of lines of inquiry, but are asking drivers with dash cam footage or any other kind of information to come forward to authorities. You're live with BBC News. Sunday marks 30 years since the start of one of the most brutal episodes in world history, the genocide against ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus in Rwanda. In just 100 days in 1994, Hutu extremists killed 800,000 people. During a commemoration ceremony in the capital Kigali, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame said the international community failed his country. Well, joining me live is one of the survivors of that genocide, Jacqueline Murekatete, and founder of the Genocide Survivors Foundation. We thank you, of course, for being with us. You were just 9 years old when this took place. You lost your parents, 6 of your siblings, most of your extended family. How have you been able to deal with that? Is it even possible to come to terms with what happened?
Well, it's been difficult. I mean, to the world, it's been 30 years. But for those of us who lived through the genocide, it may as well have been yesterday, because the memories of that time, the horrific memories, the horrific images, the loss of our families, our friends, our neighbors, living in an environment where each day we got up, not knowing whether or not we're going to survive to see the next day. These are memories that still, even 30 years later, are a part of our lives. I mean, I always tell people that genocide is something that you can never get over. So the saying that time heals, I believe it's not true. Time alone does not heal. Healing is a journey, and when you speak to even Holocaust survivors now who are in their 80s, they will tell you that the memories are still very real, that the loss is still very real. So it's an ongoing battle that survivors continue to fight.
And what about Rwanda itself as a country? These are deep wounds there. How effectively do you think it's been able to deal with that and move forward now, 3 decades on?
I think they've been tremendous progress. I mean, you can't deny that. They've been tremendous progress in terms of political progress, economically, socially. We have a government that has been very much committed to coexistence between all of Rwanda's citizens. And people have to realize that, the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi did not happen overnight. It arose from years of anti-Tutsi propaganda and indoctrination, from years of a culture where it had been made okay for Tutsis to be killed, and always with impunity. So prior to the genocide, we had a government that was very much committed to divisive politics, which monopolized power by pinning one group of citizens against another group of citizens. And fortunately, since the genocide, we've had a government, as I said, that's committed to the unity of Rwandans, that says, yes, you're Hutus, you're Tutsis, you're Twas, but you're also Rwandans who have more in common than differences. So I always say that as long as we have a leadership that's committed to unity and peaceful coexistence of all Rwandans, then the future of Rwanda is bright. But as a country that has gone through genocide, any post-genocide country, there is always a need to be vigilant, because the ideology of genocide is not an ideology that dies overnight. So there's a constant need, again, to remind Rwandans that the unity of Rwandans is the only thing that's going to ensure a peaceful future, and that there is nowhere good that extremism and hate motive violence that only leads to death and destruction. And I think, given what happened in 1994, Rwandans generally are motivated to make sure that we'll never sink back.
And since then, since 1994, looking globally, how much progress do you think has been made to create a world where genocide won't happen again in any country?
You know, I would like to say that 30 years after the genocide, I would like to say that the lessons of the genocide have been learned. But unfortunately, when you look at the state of the world today, hate-motivated violence, extremist motivated violence, I mean, we're seeing it everywhere, literally in every continent. So a lot of the lessons that should have been learned 30 years ago, unfortunately, have not been learned. We still live in a world where governments prioritize political interests, economic interests over saving innocent civilian lives from being systematically murdered. So while there been some progress in terms of education and awareness about genocide, they still very much, we still have, most governments still lack the political will to prevent genocide. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And this is why I do the work that I do with the Genocide Survivors Foundation, and that I'm speaking to you today, because again, as survivors of the genocide who lost, you know, our families, I lost my entire family, as you said, we feel motivated to use our experiences and our voice to keep speaking out about the need to do more.
It is important work. Jacqueline Murekatete, founder of the Genocide Survivors Foundation, a survivor of the Rwanda genocide herself. Thank you very much for joining us. Russia says Ukraine has carried out a drone attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. That plant is on the front line of the fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces. Both sides regularly accuse the other of shelling it and of risking nuclear disaster. It was taken from Ukrainian control shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Experts at the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed damage at one of the plant's 6 reactors from drone strikes, and that one casualty was also reported. Russian state-owned nuclear agency Rosatom said that 3 people were wounded when a canteen was hit in what they described as an unprecedented series of drone attacks. The Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, urged both sides not to jeopardize nuclear safety. Well, here in the U.S., the South Carolina Gamecocks have won the Women's College Basketball National Championship against the Iowa Hawkeyes. It was a very close game, but undefeated South Carolina took the title 87-75. Iowa star player Caitlin Clark had a record 18 points in the first quarter and 30 points overall in her final collegiate game. On Thursday, Iowa's Final Four win over UConn was the most watched women's college basketball game on record, and it was ESPN's most viewed basketball game of any kind, drawing 14.2 million viewers on Friday. In Portland, many viewers watched Sunday's championship match at the Sports Bra. That's a bar that's dedicated to women's sports, and I spoke to the owner, Jenny Wynn, a short time ago. I hope you got a chance to watch at least a bit of it. You know, Caitlin Clark, one of the biggest stars that we've seen really in women's college basketball in a long time. Undefeated South Carolina in the end, though, a bit too much. They come away with the title.
Yeah, I mean, the game was outstanding. We had seen Iowa fans fill up the bar in the past. And so, you know, I thought maybe I'd be one of a handful of South Carolina fans, but the bar was really well divided, let's say that. And when in that first quarter, Iowa came out smoking hot and like half the bar was just like shifty eyes wondering what was going on. But, you know, of course, South Carolina, they got a game plan. They stuck with it. And what I love about their game is that the bench is so deep and there are different players that step up every game. And so, yeah, it was just Cardoso's day. Like, she just had the greatest rebounds. People were just so excited. And even though the Iowa fans were disappointed at the end, everyone had to give it up for Dawn and the undefeated streak and really like 3 years of just her being an absolute legend as a coach.
We don't have the viewership numbers yet for this title game, but the semifinal between Iowa and LSU was the most watched basketball game in ESPN's history. That includes every NBA game that they've ever aired. You've had your bar since 2022. How have you seen the growth and the popularity of women's sports in general evolve in just that short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky that we opened on April 1st of 2022, because I think that we've been able to not only witness the trajectory of fandom and women's sports finally getting the recognition that it deserves, but we've also become a part of the reason why that's happening. You know, like for so long, sports bars and fans didn't have a place to go as a community to watch and grow fandom. People didn't stumble in and fall in love with women's basketball on accident. Whereas nowadays, if the game is on and people just happen to be at a sports bar eating or drinking and watching a different game, and then there's a women's game next door to it, that's how you grow fandom. Is, you know, how can you be a fan of something that you can't see? So I think that, you know, we've watched it blossom, and it's been such a privilege and an honor.
Pretty incredible stuff. Jenny Nguyen, owner of the Sports Bra in Portland, Oregon, the nation's first bar featuring only women's sports. It's great to see you and great to have you back on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the time.
Stay with us for more right here on BBC News.
Hello there. It certainly was a windy weekend, but the winds are going to be a lot lighter on Monday, and that's because Storm Kathleen to the north of Scotland is weakening and moving away. But we are seeing more cloud coming in from the south across England and Wales, and this area of low pressure is taking a bit of rain northwards as well. Clearer skies, Scotland and Northern Ireland will mean a chilly start here. We've got the early rain in North Wales and Northern England, moving northwards and largely petering out across southern Scotland. Later in the day, we'll see some rain arriving in Northern Ireland. This rain in the southwest of England pushes back into Wales, and some showery bursts of rain arrive in southern England and later into the Midlands. But ahead of that, we'll get some sunshine for a while in the Midlands and eastern England, so temperatures back up to a healthy 17 or 18 degrees. Now, if you're hoping to get a view of the partial solar eclipse in northern and western parts of the UK, well, it could be spoiled by all this cloud that's coming in and the outbreaks of rain as well. Now, we've seen the back of one area of low pressure, but there's another one arriving. This is one that's going to sit around overnight and into Tuesday. And it's going to take the rain northwards all the way into Scotland by Tuesday morning. The rain curving back into England and Wales around the low, tending to drift away eastwards into the North Sea, allowing brighter but more showery weather to come into southern and western areas, and the winds will be picking up as well. We're looking at gale force winds around some southern and western coasts of England and Wales, and with the winds picking up and that cloud and showery rain around, temperatures are going to be a lot lower. It's going to be a cooler day on Tuesday. Our top temperatures are only 11 or 12 degrees, and that's because we're seeing this northwesterly wind picking up on Tuesday into Tuesday night, but I don't think that cooler air is going to last long. Out in the Atlantic, there is milder air, and that's following this weather front, which is going to bring cloud and rain in from the west. Ahead of that, though, eastern areas starting dry on Wednesday with some early sunshine, but soon clouding over. Rain in the west pushes eastwards, heavier rain for a while, Northern Ireland, the hills of northwest England, and also into Scotland, lighter rain as you head further south across the UK. But it's gradually getting a little bit warmer on Wednesday, despite all that cloud, 14, maybe 15 degrees. But the wind direction is changing. We're getting a southwesterly wind. That is going to bring warmer weather back across the whole of the UK towards the end of the week, and temperatures could be back up to around 20 Celsius at best.
The art of good conversation is to say the right thing at the right time and in the right way. You have to be original, sympathetic, encouraging, and also keep an open mind. And you really do just need to sit back and listen.
Katty Kay chats with prominent names from the worlds of business, science, and culture.
Influential with me, Katty Kay. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
The world of film is changing faster and faster all the time. I've been reporting on cinema for more than 40 years. So what's it like to be an Oscar nominee? Our global Talking Movies team
How does that work on set?
brings you up to date on the latest in movie making from around the world.
Looking at stories from other cultures.
Interviewing top filmmakers and stars.
People seem to be emotionally charged by the film.
From blockbusters to art house cinema, we'll spotlight the brilliant and unique voices bringing their stories to the big screen.
Talking Movies. Watch on BBC iPlayer. The day's most important stories, sent every weekday direct to your inbox. Get the news you need to know and understand what it means for you. Don't miss out. Stay informed. Go to bbc.co.uk/newsdaily and sign up now.
A weekend of high-stakes diplomacy between the US and China will take stock of what has been achieved. From fast fashion to slow fashion, how one British designer is looking to transform the entire industry.